Awesome. Thanks, Kaya. Um, so this is the Forest Talks and Forest Walks book club. We're based out of Whatcom County, Washington, but open to anyone interested in learning more about issues that our forests face and how we can best protect them. If you want, please introduce yourself in the chat, share a little bit about what got you interested in local forests or what got you interested in this book club. Um, our club is sponsored by Resources, the Center for Responsible Forestry, Whatcom Million Trees Project, and the Legacy Forest Defense Coalition. So if you haven't already, please check out their websites. These are amazing organizations, and they're doing great things throughout your community. So take a look into what they're doing and get involved. Um, and without further ado, it's my honor to introduce you all to one of our authors of our book this evening, Paul Koberstein. Paul is a lifelong investigative journalist and storyteller with a passion for the natural world. He's the co-author, along with Jessica Applegate, of our book this quarter, The Canopy of Titans, The Life and Times of the Great North American Temperate Rainforests, and that was written in 2023. As most of you know by now, or if not, you'll find out shortly, it's a book that dives deep into the ecology, history, and future of the planet's most vital forest ecosystems. And as he mentioned, as an Oregon native and based in Portland, Paul has spent over 40 years reporting on environmental issues in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. He co-founded Cascadia Times in 1995, a regional environmental journal that's been recognized as one of the best new environmental publications in North America. Over the years, his work has earned some of journalism's highest honors, including the John B. Oakes Award for Distinguished Environmental Reporting and the Bruce Baer Award for Investigative Journalism. Through his writing, Paul has shed light on everything from I read coral reef ecosystems in the Pacific. That's really cool. I have to look more into that. To industrial air pollution in Oregon, always with a focus on the connections between people, place, and the natural world. We're excited to welcome him to our discussion and to hear more about the stories behind Canopy of Titans. So welcome, Paul. Tonight we'll have Daniel kind of help lead our discussion this evening. So as questions arise or comments come up, please use the raise your hand icon, and we'll do our best to get through as much information as we can. Also, feel free to drop any questions or comment in the chat box as well, and we'll keep up with those along the way. So thank you so much for joining us. At this point, I'll hand it off to Daniel and we'll get things started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Good to see everyone here. How's everyone doing? Woohoo.
Good.
Awesome. Cool. Great. Well, yeah, it's awesome to have you here, Paul. I really love this book. When I first got my hands on it 2 summers ago, it was like right when it first came out. I read it voraciously, and it was a real emotional experience because it's so relevant and current to our times. And so like often I feel like when we read tragedy, it's like the distant past, but this is very much our current reality. And it's well written. I really love the style of it. And I definitely want to keep today pretty free flow and just like open to discussion and just yeah. So if anyone else has questions as well, um, I'd just please feel free to pipe in. Um, as someone who writes myself, I'm kind of just curious about your process as a writer. I mean, this is a collaboration with Jessica, so you co-wrote it, which is always fascinating. It's like, it's you've clearly been involved in writing on these issues for a long time, but what kind of was the spark that led you to write this, and how was that all initiated, and then through the process, um, because you all were traveling together as well. But yeah, just kind of like behind the scenes, like creation of. There's so much to talk about as far as the content goes. But yeah, just as I'd love to hear just a little bit about your process as a writer.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and thank you too, Laura, and everybody for coming. Um, so yeah, um, so Laura's right. This book was published in 2023, but it was really a process that began in 2018 when Jessica and I went first to Southeast Alaska to take a look at um, President Trump's then plan to um, eliminate the roadless rule, to open up vast areas of the Tongass to logging that had been protected under the roadless rule since around 2000. And from there, we started asking questions and we realized that there are two issues that really came to our mind as we traveled. One was that a lot of scientists, well, scientists were beginning to see this ecosystem from the Northern California redwoods through Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska as a single ecosystem. And the other was that scientists were beginning to see the value of protecting forests for carbon sequestration. And we learned very quickly that this forest, this rainforest, stores more carbon per acre than any other forest in the world. And some of the hotspots, world's leading hotspot for carbon is the redwoods, but the Douglas fir region, Sitka spruce habitat are close behind. And so we wanted to get a handle on the science linking forests to the climate while we traveled through the rainforest to write about the things that we saw and were going on. I'm not sure that answered your question, but that's how we started. We continued by setting up trips to the Redwoods, to the Olympics. We tried to go to Vancouver Island, but as you may remember, 2020 was the beginning of the COVID crisis, and that's when our trip was scheduled. We made arrangements to travel around the island with a professor at UBC, University of British Columbia. We had to cancel that and report on what was happening on the island from, remotely from YouTube and other videos and interviews people were sending us. I would guess the highlight of our travels, though, was near the end. We traveled to a place called Prince of Wales Island, which is in the far southeast extreme of Alaska. And we got a bush pilot to give us a ride, an overflight over the Tongass on Prince of Wales Island. And so we could see these massive clear cuts from the air that you couldn't see from the ground. And we happened across this dock where a big cargo ship was parked, and they're loading these massive old growth yellow cedar logs onto this trip. And so we took some video, we took some photographs of this ship, and then the next day we found out that it had already left and was en route to China with this load of old growth trees from Alaska. So so many stories, and I could go on and on, but
That must have been I'm just curious a little bit about just kind of like I mean that must have been really shocking to see and I'm sure you guys were aware to some extent but maybe not to the full extent but I was just kind of curious like did you find things along the way that really surprised you I imagine that was probably one of them but that you just were really unexpected to find throughout writing Canopy of Titans or
um,
anything along those
yeah,
lines.
I mean I think what surprised me the most was the extent to which the timber industry and even academia were actually spreading misinformation about what's going on in the forest and its connection and value to biodiversity and the climate. And it looked like they were lying every time their strategy every time they came up with, a regulation that would hold them back, usually protect wildlife, but increasingly now climate, they would make something up. And they can continue to do that um, even today. And so the one thing that surprised me was the misinformation. And we get into it a little more deeply in an article that'll come out next month in Earth Island Journal on the connection between the timber industry, academia, University of Washington, and other top tier forestry schools, and um, misinformation. The other thing that surprised me, um, Sitka spruce. I really didn't know much about Sitka spruce. You know, there are three species of trees in this rainforest that exceed 300 feet. Coastal redwood, the Douglas fir, and the Sitka spruce. We found in California, in the state park there, a 300 footers growing side by side by side, one of each species. Pretty remarkable. But um, the other thing that we were surprised by was research showing that these trees, when they're growing near a salmon spawning site, grow much faster than trees further away. And the salmon bring nutrients from the ocean, they carry it to their spawning site, and then beaver and eagles and raccoons or whatever will take it the next mile to the tree. And the trees, grow bigger. The salmon feed the trees, and the trees store the carbon. And it's a wonderful cycle. The other thing is that beaver. So beaver has been ridiculed and killed because it's treated as vermin, a nuisance. But we found that salmon do much better when they are raised, when they grow in wetlands that are dominated by beaver. Beaver build dams, um, trap water, trap sediment, and they trap salmon and enable them to grow and stronger, grow larger and stronger, and are better able to withstand the next 4 or 5 years at sea. And when they come back, they are 3 times more likely to spawn. And these channels have been shown to provide 3 times as much wetland habitat for salmon in the estuary. So, beaver, salmon, it's not just trees that mitigate climate change. So those are the main things we learned with the science we didn't know.
Right. I definitely have a response, but go for it, Judith. You've had your hand up.
Yes, that's
Judith,
fascinating,
you.
Paul. Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm Judith from Bellingham, and just have really been, since I've come here in 2013, I think, 2012. I live among the trees here in Whatcom Falls Park, so
Nice to
um,
meet you,
they've,
Judith.
they've
Thank you.
they've grown into be. Anyways, when you're talking about surprises, um, I'm just aghast about the use of Agent Orange. So were you aware of that before, or because I've talked to other people and they're like, yeah, it was so widely used. I just it's just a phenomenon.
Well, there are two parts to my answer to your question. Um, the main ingredient in Agent Orange, the most toxic chemical, and actually the most toxic industrial chemical ever made, is something called 2,4,5-T, which is a dioxin. And they invented 2,4,5-T in the late World War II era and began using it on agricultural crops and in forests around 1950. And they didn't tell anybody. They didn't really know the toxicology of this chemical, and they just sprayed it willy-nilly without really knowing what they were doing. Fast forward to 1978 in Alsea, Oregon, which is pretty much the heart of the Oregon Cascades, about 35 miles from Corvallis. Um, Women were developing miscarriages, and one of the women who was affected had been doing research on dioxin at the University of Oregon, and she did um, a study of some kind that pointed out there could be a link between those two. Um, Colorado State, actually the EPA brought Colorado State in to look at the issue as they had been seeing similar problems in other parts of the world. There's the Time Beach crisis in Missouri. There's a place in Italy where dioxin is a problem, and they found that this was indeed 2,4,5-T that was causing it. Now, you mentioned Agent Orange, and what's the connection there? That there's an interesting story. 2,4,5-T is the active ingredient in Agent Orange. It's in there with something called 2,4-D, which is not as toxic. In 1973 or 4, a professor at Oregon State University got a hold of a batch, some barrels of Agent Orange that had been surplus held over stored by the Air Force in Colorado. This was after the Defense Department determined that it was not safe to be spraying Agent Orange in the jungles of Vietnam. Too many health problems were turning up with, the local population, American soldiers, so they stopped it. This professor, Mike Newton at OSU, got a hold of several barrels of this stuff and decided to run experiments on the use of 2,4,5-T, Agent Orange, in the forests of some private forests around Corvallis and Roseburg. He didn't tell anybody that they were spraying Agent Orange, but he did it anyway. He was never really reprimanded at all for doing this, but it was blatantly illegal. In 1980, the EPA banned the use of 2,4,5-T, and of course, Agent Orange, and so the industry had to turn to other chemicals. So that led to a long history in Oregon where regulation was almost non-existent until like 2011. And you could spray within 60 feet of a school or a house or a church or a bus stop. This is the most toxic stuff in the world ever invented. Now they use something called atrazine, which is a endocrine disruptor. If you and I know Laura Weitz knows because she worked at Oregon Environmental Council. Sorry to call you out, Laura. But atrazine is
It's
banned
quite all
in
right.
atrazine is banned in Europe, and for good reason. So now they're having health problems in areas near Eugene where it's being sprayed, a place called Triangle Lake, but there are other places as well. But my point in talking about these chemicals is that there's no need to use them in a forest, especially these forests. Douglas fir, redwood, Sitka spruce, all the other conifers in our forest grow rapidly. These are the biggest trees in the world. They don't need chemicals to make them grow bigger or faster. The only reason they're being sprayed is because the timber industry thinks it'll give them an extra bit of profit. So that's what's happening. And I think that the more outrage that can be generated over these chemicals, the better.
Yes, thank you. It's so sad.
And there's a story in one chapter of a woman named Carol Von Strum who has devoted her life to fighting herbicide spraying. It's a tragic story that she had to go through. Her children were attacked, she thinks, by the industry and killed. But she's still soldiering on. And she's written 2 books talking about, and there's now a new movie about trail events from so a real hero.
I have a quick follow-up question, Paul, for
Sure.
you on that. What's your knowledge about whether atrazine or glyphosate is used more often? Do you have any sense about that?
Well, glyphosate, last time I checked, was the most commonly used chemical Roundup uh, out there. But atrazine is near the top as well. Atrazine, I mean, glyphosate has been, linked to cancer. I'm not sure that the cancer link between atrazine and cancer has been proven, but there are so many other problems related to atrazine that it almost doesn't matter. This stuff is bad.
Absolutely.
I have some follow-up on the subject of atrazine and 2,4,5-T and Agent Orange as well.
Sure.
I'm lucky enough that one of my friends is a filmmaker and has made some pretty amazing documentaries. I like to send follow-up emails after these book clubs, and so I'll definitely share some links. So Shane Anderson and Jesse Clark have done documentaries about salmon restoration, old growth conservation, and the legacy
Yeah, I
forest
know
movement.
Jesse.
Yeah, and so Jesse is about to release a video on the use of 2,4,5-T specifically through aerial spraying with helicopters. And I was fortunate enough to he shared like a early edit of it. And it's mind-blowing and so enraging and really informative. And it's mind-blowing how these activities are happening right in front of us. And I think that I'm doing him a favor by like kind of creating suspense of like, y'all should watch it because I can't like share the link. But I think talking about it and hyping it up, what's really crazy about this documentary is that he has selfie footage of a employee of Big Timber who's a truck driver for driving these huge amounts of toxic chemicals to all of these clear cuts to then get loaded in aerial into helicopters. And this dude just got the job on Craigslist and he doesn't know anything about anything and he's just documenting the whole thing being like what the F is going on and just showing atrocious violations of law and environmentalism, like an absurd amount. And I don't understand why this stuff isn't like being blasted on mainstream media. Like it's egregious. And it just sucks that we live in this time where that doesn't get the attention it deserves. And that's a whole other tirade about you know existentialism and civilization, but like, man, yeah, so I've really because it's really hard, it's really easy to get like down in the dumps about these realities, but it's I also have to stress the like it there is a critical mass, and I think Paul, when you and I were having a Zoom getting ready for your talk at Village Books on the 13th of next month, that there is people are catching on to this, like we're learning these new things, cool things like, wow, it is a really new understanding, at least to Western culture, that salmon feed the forest, and to your average person living in these more urban developments that are like shielded from these, clear cuts and these activities, it's shocking to be like, whoa, you're using Agent Orange and then to get firsthand footage of it being done so egregiously. Like, oh yeah, Kaya just dropped a chat. I was about to do that as well. So there, and we should do a follow-up email. I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I'm connecting the dots. So State Lands September is coming up, and that's a month where we're all dedicated to state lands. And the other night I just went on a movie binge because we want to make documentaries about ecoforestry. So I was just like watching everything I could get my hands on for kind of several days. And I won't like dump everything on you, but I feel like, giving some movies is great. And then it's just they're okay. I've been going for a while, but yeah, the whole aerial spraying is just mind-blowing and egregious, and I think that's what I'm just trying to say.
Well,
So
it's mind-blowing and egregious, and it's so absolutely not necessary. These
yes,
trees
yeah,
grow like crazy.
yeah,
The biggest trees in the world. There's plenty of money in those trees if you're willing to see them as a long-term investment. Wall Street
mhm,
sees they see everything as a short-term
mhm,
investment or as short-term
yeah,
as they possibly can. So that's why you
mhm.
see 20-year rotations, 30-year rotations, 40-year rotations. These trees never get big enough to sequester any carbon. They are, packed together in tree farms where there's very little biodiversity. I mean, you can go on and on about the evils of industrial forestry.
Yeah, and
So,
that's really
thank you.
the elephant in the room now, and I feel like the people who are um kind of fully in the game or working for environmental nonprofits or working in litigation. It just all the people who are like kind of full-time committed to environmental causes and trying to turn the dial, which is, as we know, very challenging in the current political atmosphere. We're pretty lucky here in Washington State. Like there are some really cool things happening on our state lands right now, and that's some great updates there. Um, but to me, the huge endeavor is how do we transition away from current timber management practices and how do we get to the to do that and to make these understandings and and sometimes it can feel like a David and Goliath situation. Some of these huge companies with all their wealth and their propaganda and whatnot, they can seem like these undefeatable bosses. um, but there is a pretty significant upswell in the Pacific Northwest towards timber management practices that are better ecologically. And that's on a spectrum, and some of them are really spectacular. So I feel like really just like highlighting those of just making big timber's methodology irrelevant by showing how well these other modalities work. And it is, of course, the profit thing is tricky, but I feel like the best way to address the profit is to rebuild the understanding that that isn't the whole point to material existence. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of people also feel that in their hearts as well. So I think there's a lot of education and empowerment amongst like realizing like, whoa, how do we never know any of this is going on? But yeah, Laura.
Yeah, that's so wild, the spraying stuff to think about. I was curious if you came across um any folks in the timber industry that were practicing ecological forestry or harvesting timber in a sustainable manner. I know you mentioned at least one in your book, but I was curious kind of if you came across any others. And I am aware of some here in Washington. I was just curious what your thoughts are.
I wish I could be more optimistic than I am. My next project actually is looking at timber um, education, forestry education. And I'm looking at Oregon State University, where they have some really great forward-looking thinking professors, but they have an administration that is um, very much in tune with the timber industry's desires. In the 1990s, there was the development of the Northwest Forest Plan. And actually, some professors at Oregon State University led the charge. Jerry Franklin was there in the 80s, and named Norm Johnson, a couple other guys. And they wrote this great plan of ecoforestry. And at the same time, Oregon State got a $1 million grant from the MacArthur Foundation to incorporate sustainability and ecological stewardship in their curriculum. They're slipping. That was 30 years ago. Today, they've gone back to many of the um, same old paradigm. They have a research force that is they manage to actually teach industrial forestry. The ecological aspect of forestry is missing. They don't emphasize carbon sequestration. Instead, they just teach clear cutting, um, herbicide spraying, same old business as usual. So I'm not as optimistic as I wish I was. But the reason I am optimistic is because of the activism and the public embrace of forests, the people, forest advocates. It goes beyond just, the groups that are represented by Center for Responsible Forestry or the other, Sierra Club, so on. There's a lot of passion, a lot of warmth towards protecting forests, momentum towards sequestering carbon in forests is building, and I see that as a really bright spot, really good reason to hope. One person who interviewed me about the book told me that he had thought that this book would be another, expose, things are bad, things are awful, all the trees are being clear cut. He said the book left him with hope because it's about a solution. It's about solutions. If we protect trees, we can actually reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the air so long as we cut back on fossil fuel consumption. And it's a very, very basic, simple math. We just have to do it.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that. Just sometimes when you get so deep into the weeds on this and feel so overwhelmed by a lot of the negativity, it's important to just go back to like we just need to protect them. Period. What can you do today? You can protect a tree. That's the best thing you can do, in my opinion. But
A couple months after we finished the book in 2022, we didn't get it published for another year, but that's another story. Dealing with supply industry chains and whatnot with publishing world, and I don't really understand any of it. But um, anyway, a couple months after we finished writing, the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the world's leading scientific authority on climate, put out one of its major reports that said protecting forests is a solution. And that was for the first time in their history they had said that. They said that the best way, an essential way to reduce human vulnerability to climate change is protect forests. You'll hear a lot of timber industry people claim that they're following IPCC recommendations. Yeah, they're following the recommendations of 25 years ago. Things have really changed a lot in recent years. And the IPCC is now on board with protecting forests. And you don't see the timber industry talk about that, but it's a fact. We need to see more awareness of what's going on internationally and the call for protecting forests as a natural climate solution.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Paul. This was, similar to one of the questions that we had kind of collected in our list here. And I think just on that theme, what do you sort of hope that readers will take away? If they take away one thing or one theme from reading the book, what do you hope that is? And where do you think on an individual level, folks can make the most difference, if they care about these issues?
Well, I do hope that this book will help inspire people to be like me in awe of these big, wonderful forests we have and to work to protect them like you guys are all doing. Because, as I just said, protecting trees is essential, not just for biodiversity, although that is very true, but for the climate. And so to love forests, not only for their visual, you know, beauty, but as a, as an agent of nature. They make the planet better. You know, tens of thousands of years, trees have been removing carbon dioxide from the air and stabilizing the climate. Some people are saying, well, it's just a protecting forests for the climate. It's something that, the tree huggers just dreamed up. No, this has been happening for thousands of years. This is what is supposed to happen. We've screwed up the planet, and now we've screwed up our understanding of the planet. We don't, there's not a wide recognition that this is a necessary solution.
Yeah, I think that building a relationship with these places is important for so many levels as far as like long-term solution to the dilemmas that we're in. It's just like I feel like it's a root cause in a way because there's injustice in the way that we treat each other human to human, and there's injustice in how human treats the non-human world, the natural world. And I feel like both of them are related to a disconnect with where we come from, with our connection to these environments, of how dependent we are. I'm reading another book. Well, anyways, it's yeah, it's our connection to these places is just so
Well,
valuable.
if you've ever stood next to or under a 2,000-year-old tree and just feel its vast history and memory of what, life has been like for the last two millennia, how can you get to the point where you will decide to cut that tree down?
Hmm.
Who thinks like that? Who would do that? It's like that, and I write this in another article that's coming out. The Nooksack giant, east of where you guys are in Bellingham, which was cut down in 1896, 2,000 years maybe old, 465 feet tall, the tallest tree in world history, and they cut it down. They didn't think to protect it, to preserve it. I mean, even for the poetry of this living thing, it's boggles my mind that they would do that. And all the trees in the forest, in these forests in the northwest, potentially could become Nooksack giants. We just leave them alone, let them grow. We don't know though, because we've been doing such a thorough job of logging them. We have no idea what we've cut down. We really don't. All that memory is lost. It'll take thousands of years to regain it. And that's daunting to me. Donna, do you want to ask that question? It's a good question. There's a question from Donna in the chat.
Oh yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
an
Which one?
opportunity. Oh,
Which
the
one?
opportunity about the natural systems, is it that one, Paul?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Are you Donna?
yeah. So
Hi.
I'm Donna. Hi,
So yeah, ask your
and
question.
I'm a retired civil engineer. So I've been more comfortable like talking about energy systems, and I've been fighting that fight for a long time. But in my retirement, for my own sanity, I've been spending more time thinking about forests and advocating for that. And uh, the state climate plan, there's a draft out for comment, and this was the last day to comment. But I think it would be reasonable for people if they're just hearing about this and it's so important to push on the state agencies to think about the role of natural systems because it's kind of been not recognized how important that is and how tied that is to climate. So I guess that's my suggestion is that people go on it's easy enough to find the Department of Ecology and either call or just see if you can find this. The CCAP is the acronym they're using for the draft. And it's the state climate plan. I'm sorry I don't have the link handy, but I could send it. Maybe I could look for it and see if I can find it. I'm
You,
traveling right
you
now
said something that,
with family.
oh, well, thank you for joining in. You said something that kind of tapped an interest of mine, and that is the value of these forests for our mental health. I'm not sure that maybe you didn't say
Yeah.
that. I think you did.
Well, I felt some despair
And so,
because,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, thinking about
because
these
we're
forests
not
being
making,
lost is fairly
we're not,
depressing,
it
um,
is.
but the benefits of forests for your own personal
Right.
mental health well-being, I think are really
Right.
undervalued by our society. Um,
Yes.
I know I feel a whole lot better when I'm in a forest than
Yeah. Yeah.
on pavement or wherever, or
Even being near a tree
being right near a tree.
and things like insects, birds, the natural things in the world that some people have very little contact with. I think we're really missing that.
And because we live on the Pacific near the coast, we're like right underneath the
Yeah.
Pacific Flyway, and the number of birds that fly
Yeah.
through here is astounding. And
Yeah.
it's all part of the rainforest ecosystem.
I live in Grays Harbor.
Okay,
I live in Grays Harbor near the National Wildlife Refuge right there.
wonderful. Yeah,
They're trying to build a pellet plant there, a pellet plant
yeah, Hokum.
to send the pellets to Asia to burn for electricity.
And of course,
So yeah,
they
so we're
claim
trying to fight that
they
off
claim that
locally.
doing so will, mitigate climate change. This is another one of their lies, by the way,
No, no,
that burning wood pellets
yeah,
is going to save the world. Um, excuse me, it's actually more polluting than coal and not a solution. It's
yeah,
crazy.
you're right. So I'm just listening, and I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate that book because I really learned about the role of our forests. I knew they were important, but I didn't know how important until really the last few years. And that book's been part of that. I appreciate it.
Well, it was writing the book was a real education for me because I didn't know much about forest and climate, or I
Oh,
had kind of an idea that some scientists were talking about this being one ecosystem. I get that there's a lot of commonality between the
yeah,
redwoods, the Douglas fir region, and the Sitka spruce region, and that's clear the same species and so on. But the benefits to the climate. When Jessica and I went to Alaska in 2018, the Forest Service was just issuing an EIS on the reversal of the roadless rule. If you guys remember, the roadless rule was to protect large unroaded roadless forests from logging. And the Forest Service under Trump wanted to reverse that. And they put out an EIS, an environmental impact statement, which is supposed to tally up all the environmental impacts that would result from logging. Well, they didn't even mention climate. They didn't even mention carbon sequestration. Um, Today, um, they kind of have to because they get sued. The environmental groups have been starting to sue them over it. And who knows whether going forward there will be any environmental laws. But as things stand right now, they have to consider climate. And I know Trump doesn't want to because he's an idiot, but another story.
If nobody's got a hand up, I maybe just wanted to ask um whether or not you had any unfinished business, as it relates to some of the topics that you and Jessica explored in the book. Is there anything that you really want to dig into more deeply in the future? Um,
Well, I guess this would be a good time to say that, yes, there will be a sequel coming soon to theaters near you. Now, I have about 4 chapters written of the next book, and the theme is going to be misinformation. Um,
mm,
this piece in Earth Island Journal next month on a group called Quorum, which is an industry group affiliated with the University of Washington. um, in 5 other timber companies, and 17 other forestry schools across the country, including Yale, of all people. Um, and the misinformation and the gaslighting they're doing to to make people think that it's better to store carbon in lumber than in a forest. And ideally, all the trees will be cut down and we'll have all the wood, all the carbon in tall buildings. And that's how they think. So get ready to be inspired by skyscrapers.
That's exciting. I'm really looking forward to reading that. That feels really relevant to the conversations we're having locally, um, especially as we try to, connect with and learn from folks in industry. It's hard to get on the same page about kind of the factual and scientific basis that we're all working from. So
And you know
appreciate
that
that.
the academic world, they should be, heeding closely to the facts and latest advances. And this is not happening. They are, in many cases, simply parroting the company line. And that's really, really distressful to me. But it's also an opportunity for me to do more digging. So that's what I'm doing.
And one thing I find tricky about the misinformation is that there are often partial truths, and I think that's why it becomes so sticky, and the timber industry makes it so easy to say things like, harvest and replant is one of their logos. Like we're so good because we replant. And I from the years that I've spent digging deeper and deeper and really trying to wrap my head around this, and then also just analyzing the different approaches of making change from different perspective, different roles. There has to be some kind of like we're not going to just wipe the timber industry off the face of the earth, and we're not going to just stop using wood for all purposes. But the issue that I see with big timber is that they're using arguments that have partial truths and then they justify their abhorrent management practices. It's like some of these truths that they claim they could be performed way better, way more effectively, way more optimally. It's like when I go into some structures that are built out of big timber, they're beautiful and I love working with wood and like yeah, it's like if all the wood that was used for construction was or all the wood was used to like fix into these beautiful permanent structures and was taken from forests that were treated with respect and have old growth conditions and were selectively logged, etc. Like that would be a beautiful way to sequester carbon in structures that we able to enjoy and live in, but that's not how it's being done. It's just like I actually think that idea is beautiful, but it's being twisted in this way to justify really poor management practices from the industry. And so it's like trying to unravel those things and being like, look, like we can do it better. It can be more effective. Um, um, has been kind of a nut that I, again, through like filmmaking and storytelling and getting all this information out here. I
That's an excellent point. That is, um, we don't argue in the book anywhere, don't log. But we do point out that there are forests that you can log and do less damage to the climate than others. There are forests that store more carbon, are more carbon dense than others. The ones in our region happen to be the most carbon dense in the world. Um, but there are forests that are a fraction of that in terms of their density, the richness of carbon. And if you cut those and make wood products out of those forests, you have less of an impact on the climate. And I'm not saying that we have to protect all the big trees. We really ought to think about it. And it's a trade-off. I
Yeah.
mean, some people think we should use hemp, and maybe so. But I think that we can use wood, continue to use wood if we're smart about it.
Yes. That's what I've been really thinking. I feel like there's so many ways that we waste wood. And again, the timber industry argument that, oh, we're sequestering all this carbon through wood products. most of it just ends up in a landfill through disposable material. If it was all going into structures that would last generations and generations and generations and were built with super high quality, okay, maybe there could be a conversation, but that's just not the case at all. And even these structures that they're building, a lot of it's disposable, but then a lot of it's also um, fast architecture that just gets torn down after, one generation, maybe a generation and a half.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, wood one of the things that the timber industry won't tell you is that wood decays. When you build a building, its carbon content will decay over time, and there are mathematical algorithms that show this. It's actually quite a short period of time, 3 or 4 decades. You know, um, the timber industry does say things that are true. Wood is less damaging to the climate than building things out of concrete or iron or whatever. So there are advantages to wood for sure, but they tend to overstate those advantages and don't account for all the things that are happening in the forest when they cut it down in terms of
Exactly. They don't account for their horrible management practices. They don't account for their own pollution, their own methodologies. And
and their
that's
math
where I
is
really
bad, bad.
hung up on. Yeah, they're using it to justify a lot. So, um, Janine pointed out that if people do want to get more actively involved in these issues, the no biomass is a really good movement. It's like from being involved in conservation work, I feel like kind of there's a lot of issues to juggle and it can be overwhelming, but just like fixating on one is a great thing. It's like I'm really focused on older forests on state lands and even that can be like, whoa, that's a lot, but then to think about all these other major issues. So it's like if you're chomping at the bit for something, because right now I feel like with state lands we're actually doing pretty good, and we got a lot of people involved, where I feel like biomass is something to really focus on. Because when you get these passionate citizens who take it upon themselves to educate themselves about this issue because they're being affected, you become an expert, and you do become a political force when you gain that level of expertise and can start speaking in terms of policy and legality and the science behind it. So, biofuels kind of always been on my radar, but I haven't really thought about it. And as kind of an update too, it's like as I said, the elephant in the room is big timber, and that's a tough one to crack. All these private lands that are managing in horrible ways, and then there's like the cousin, I guess, or something, with state lands where it is a much, much better management. But again, the bar has been set really low because of the last 200 years of like big timber kind of evolution. So state lands is way better than private lands, but there's a lot of room to improve. And this Tuesday, Dave Upthegrove, the commissioner of the DNR, is making an announcement that they're going to move forward with conserving 77,000 acres of legacy forest, which is something we've been working for
That's the number you guys came up with years ago.
yeah, that's how like that the whole reason I'm here is because of that movement on state lands. And again, Upper Red Sats next door is the own version of that in my world, but I'm also aware of all these other forests. And so it's like we can't be doing these things one by one, whack-a-mole. We need to just from a policy level take them all off from harvest. And it's really complicated because these forests are entrenched in these financial systems that generate revenue for people who need to use it, school districts, fire departments, the and so the way that this situation right now is being approached on state lands is that we've found out, or the DNR has found out, because they've gone in and done stand surveys. It's like, look, there's a huge conversation right now about older forests on state lands. And then through the grassroots movement, lo and behold, we got a commissioner in office who's willing to take this conservation conversation seriously. So let's figure out how many older forests do we have on our state lands? Is it 77,000 acres or is it more or is it less? And so they did a big analysis and the data is still coming in, but it looks as if there's actually quite a bit more. And so in this process of like moving forward, there has to be middle ground. And that kind of connects to another person, Mitch Friedman, who just released a book about kind of the philosophy of conservation or of like of activism is like how do you make large scale effective change? And in the case of the DNR, the the thought is that the 30,000 legacy forest acres in addition, like more than we thought that we had, those would kind of like be used to appease the industry that's infuriated right now that these forests are on pause. But then from like a hardliner standpoint, it's like, no, we can't log anything. So it's like you have one camp of like all or nothing, like don't touch anything ever, and then you have the like industry that's like, it's ours, like we're gonna take all of it down to the ground. And then you have like kind of everyone in the middle, and then Dave's in the position of like, what do I do? And then you have these nonprofit policy oriented folks that are trying to like guide him and give him input and solutions. So it becomes a really challenging situation because like we won in a way, 77,000 acres. Like we're moving forward, but now there's 30,000 acres that shouldn't be touched, but it looks like it is. So I'm kind of just freestyling. Like this is all literally unfolding in real time. Like Dave is making the public announcement on
One of
Tuesdays.
the things that you said, oh, there's a couple of things that if I could just jump in and
Please.
kind of respond to a couple of things. Um,
Yeah.
there's the state has 2.1 million acres, and we're talking about
Yep.
protecting 100,000 of that, maybe. I mean, it's not like we want it all. We just want to protect the sites.
Absolutely.
The other thing
Totally.
is that you read about the wood pellet issues being something that people can really glom onto.
Hmm.
There, as we talked about, one proposed in Hoquiam, another online coming online maybe in Longview, another one in Coos Bay. There are two others in California that were canceled this year. Um, but this is an industry that is built on lies. In Europe, burning wood pellets is considered a renewable resource, energy resource, which is absolutely ridiculous. And there actually many people are trying to change that, but because it's considered renewable, there are subsidies flowing to this industry, and they're pillaging, um, have been pillaging the forests in the southeast United States for 15 years. They're eyeing the Northwest, and who knows what's going to happen. Um, if those aren't defeated, there'll be another more pressure on these forests for sure.
Yeah. And to absolutely. And as far as this large decision happening with the DNR considering what to do about these 30,000 acres, um, it's the way that I would approach it is using it as an opportunity of performing way higher bar ecological forestry. And like that's what I would suggest. It's like the DNR has the opportunity to push the bar upwards in like setting a new standard. And so it's
Well,
like,
these are the older trees. These are mature forests over 80 or whatever the year
mhm,
your threshold is. These are
yeah,
the trees that store the most carbon. They sequester the most carbon. It makes
yeah,
sense to protect them.
yeah, yeah,
Can I add something here too? I
yeah,
think there's a couple points that we want to keep in mind, and one is that if the DNR suddenly come up with 30,000 more acres of trees, I want to know exactly where those are and what they are and how they interact with the 77,000. I mean, it's kind of
100%.
weird that this has just come
Absolutely.
up. And so
Yeah.
it sounds to me like it could be, I tend to be, a bit not conspiratorial, but there's a lot to mistrust. And so I tend to want to find real data for those kinds of claims and make sure that they're not just finding 30,000 acres that we get to log.
Oh yeah,
You know what I
it'll
mean?
all be
So,
accessible for
well,
sure
I hope,
and
but
heavily
there's a
scrutinized.
lot of mistakes that we know the DNR makes
Oh yeah.
on many of their timber sales, and we've got
Mhm.
people going out, right? Um, LFTC and different people go out there and they find those gaps and they bring them to the attention of the DNR, and sometimes the DNR gets pulled up and reined in about that. So
Which
there is
is
the potential for a lot of
amazing. Yeah.
misconduct there.
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to make was that when we were talking about whether trees, Paul, you were saying that that trees are a really good source of building material, for good reasons. But I think we also need to remember that when we compare them to other building materials, which unfortunately there's just not enough options out there. And I think, hemp would be something that we should really look at closely. But that trees are rarely taken when we did all the climate mitigation strategies, when we do our LIDAR, when we do our calculations for what trees do for climate. Oftentimes, I noticed in our thirst and climate mitigation plan, they never even counted the value of the mitigatory capacity of the trees. And so saving trees wasn't even really part of the mitigation plan because they weren't really calculating that into the carbon problem. So they were, calculating residential building and transportation, all of these big things, but they weren't calculating forests. And this is a huge
Sure.
blind spot. It's a
Yeah.
huge blind
So
spot.
this
And
is
so,
a global blind spot because the
yeah,
IPCC didn't even begin to recognize the carbon sequestration and protecting value of protecting trees until
absolutely.
3 years ago.
Right, right. And not only do they not do that, but then we only have a single digit percentage of our legacy forests even left. I mean, they're mostly gone. They're mostly gone. And so, you know, we know the industry is putting up any possible lies or equivocations they can just to keep logging. And we all know that. I'm speaking to the choir here, but it is a big blind spot in the
Mhm.
carbon equation that we've been putting forward until, like you said, Paul, very recently.
Yeah, 100,000 acres out of 2.1 million acres, that's less than one half of 1%. That's not a lot of, it's not a big chunk.
No, it's
Mm.
not.
No, no, but no, but it's also the best stuff. It's like the timber. It's like the timber industry. They're salivating over it, and we have so little of it left, and so it's just a great on the ground example of moving forward in this movement, right? It's just like you got on one side the Trump administration just wants to clear cut it all down to the ground, and then you have people that see the ecological value, and then in this specific case, it's like those worlds are kind of meeting, but in the context of a state agency.
And
Because
after you cut it all down, then what do you do? You're going to
Mhm.
close the mill anyway, right? And you're going to
Totally.
have, and you're
I
going to be in
know.
a worse spot with
That's
regards
what
to
cracks me up. It's like
climate.
what does the industry think they're going to do when when they burn through all their own resources? It's
So
just
in 1960, Weyerhaeuser built a big sawmill just north of Coos Bay, and they had a tree farm right there, about 200,000 acres of old growth trees. And this mill was built to handle old growth. It was a huge capacity. So Weyerhaeuser, over the next 30 years, 3 decades, liquidated the entire 200,000 acres of forest in this tree farm. And when they were done with that, you know what they did? They shut the mill down, and the mill is today a casino. That's what happens.
Mhm.
They're not up against the spotted owl. They're up against the
No.
Pacific Ocean.
Carol, you've had your hand up a long time. Or maybe it's,
Hi.
yeah.
I really appreciate the information about the DNR here in Washington State. Means a lot. I wanted to ask, in the comments I asked about if Mr. Koberstein knows anything about Bill Schoaf and the book that he wrote about the Tongass. But I also am
Vaguely, vaguely. I haven't not read it.
vaguely, it's out of print. It's phenomenal. He was a whistleblower. It is a stunning story.
Do you remember what year that came out?
Oh, golly. Uh, 80s
There was
maybe.
a book in the 80s that came out. I think that might have been it.
The Taking of the Tongass is what it's called.
Right.
Anyway, it's phenomenal and disturbing. I'm curious. Number one, the one reason I'm happy about the saving of these legacy forests is that a lot of them are along watersheds. And I know we work with the Legacy Forest Defense Coalition. And here in Kitsap County, Green Mountain is one of the areas. And the areas where the trees are tend to be watersheds. And Kitsap
Absolutely.
may not realize it, but we're going to be hurting for water because the only water we get comes from rainfall, and it's sequestered by trees and goes into the aquifers. It's um, a priority that we save these trees, not just because they're tr beautiful trees, but because our watersheds need them to remain there. I'm curious to know what you think about the Olympic Peninsula because I've just continued to be deeply worried about what's going on out there. They're just clear cutting like crazy. Ranier is a terrible corporation, and I'm
Yeah,
wondering,
yeah. Olympic National Park is surrounded by some state lands, but a lot of private land. And
right?
that is all, and all the old growth is gone. The older mature trees are gone almost. Um, I mean, it's the same story in Oregon and California, to be honest. Um,
Well, thank you for your book. I look forward to the next one.
well, thank you so much, and thank you for coming out tonight.
You bet.
And a lot of people here are involved in the legacy forest movement, and so yeah, this is a big update. It's been under wraps for a while, and it's all coming to a head on Tuesday. So I'm kind of spilling the beans here, but I mean the official announcement is happening on Tuesday. So I think it's a great opportunity to really show Dave an enormous amount of support because he's going to need it. There's going to be tons of backlash.
When
And
he got into office, one of the first things he did was declare a 6-month pause so they could do this inventory, so they could find out
exactly.
how much we
And
have.
now there's
And this
and now they're
happened. This
doing
comes
it.
out Tuesday. That's good to know.
Yeah, and now they're doing it. And he's going to be facing tremendous pressure. So the more public support and the more educated public support that we can give him, the better. And we're going to be launching a campaign to help facilitate that, to funnel our public support to the DNR and to Dave so they know that and so the industry knows that. And furthermore, it's like there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be really angry at Dave because of the 30,000 acres, because some of those 30,000 acres are going to be close to where they live and forests that they're attached to. So, but we can't like we just won what we have wanted. We wanted 80,000 acres preserved. That was like the original
Right.
goal of this movement when it was incepted. And a big point of Mitch's book is to not move the goalposts. We have to be trusted partners. And it's like we got what we asked for. And so instead of like being upset about this new thing that's developing of the 30,000 acres in question, what we need to be doing is encouraging the DNR to innovate and to do better and like yes, we support you. 80,000 acres. Awesome. That's amazing. Now we have 30,000. Don't just clear cut them. Like, and we're going to articulate the best path forward. The DNR may not do that, but this is an opportunity to continue pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing them without betraying like being a good partner and like sticking to like this is what we asked for, thank you. And
You're
yeah,
not asking for all that much, to be honest.
totally,
And
absolutely.
as a
It's not,
percentage of what
no.
they are using for industrial
Yeah,
forestry, it's a drop in the bucket.
totally. Yeah, and we don't quite know yet. It's it and I don't want to go any further, but like this is really an opportunity to be like, look, like these forests, they should be not touched. But if you're going to touch these other acreage beyond the 80,000 that you're going to conserve, because the 80,000 acres that will be conserved should push the HCP targets up to 15%, which is like what their policy requirements are, which is great. And then anything
Makes sense.
beyond that, like we need to be innovating ecological forestry, and the DNR is the perfect place to do it. And in a way, this is the perfect political opportunity because we have a commissioner who's open to it, and we have a very robust like support network through the nonprofit world that are creating solutions of longer rotations, of all these methodologies through alternative forms of revenue, through getting DNR legally allowed to enter into certain carbon markets and recreation and et cetera. So it's just like be on the lookout for that. It's like we really need to support Dave in this process, even if it's not perfect, so we can continue this path of improvement and innovation.
As you know that what you get from Dave could be lost in 4 years. Some, Trump lookalike could be elected to that office, I guess. And
Hmm.
all the promises of protecting forests evaporate. So you, as someone once told me, to be a forest advocate, you have to work at it every day. If you want to liquidate a forest, you only have to do it once.
Yeah,
This is
it's
this
so
is
annoying.
this is something you have to keep at.
Totally. Yeah, after reading the I mean, that was the first thing I thought about after reading your section about the Tongass. And
Right.
it one day it's protected, one day it's not. And I was and and I'm not the only one that's thinking that. So I think a lot of us are thinking of how do we
Yeah,
make this more
we left open the
permanent?
possibility of Trump returning to office in that
Yeah,
chapter.
yeah. Well,
We
there
left,
are definitely like I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, but we are trying to think of mechanisms that would lock up this land for extended periods of time.
maybe a
Yeah.
constitutional thing, who knows, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like both policy and then like you could lock it up through policy or you could lock it up through economic ways that aren't harvesting like a carbon contract where it's like don't and then hopefully locking it up for 50 to 100 years would buy enough time where in 50 or 100 years we'll have evolved enough to realize, whoa, so glad we didn't log it.
Well,
Now
if
that
you
that
do that, Daniel,
yeah,
if you do that, if you're successful, you
yeah.
will be a world leader in this regard
It's
because
not me. This is a whole bunch of other people.
you all, plural, I guess,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
world leadership to
Yeah,
show that protecting forests makes sense and can be done.
yeah. Totally. It's kind of a cool opportunity. It's just we should be leading the way and,
This is
and
the
setting the
best forest
standard.
in the world for
Yeah,
storing carbon.
yeah.
There are no number, there are number two, solid plus. This is number one. And
So we have a little bit of time left, and there was a question of just any more experiences or anecdotes or stories of just like the writing process, because what's unique about this situation is that you're the author, and so we kind of get to pick your brain. Um,
yeah, I mean,
And
that's
I
fun.
think
mentioned,
Or
Judith
Judith had a hand up too.
Judith had
oh,
her
someone
hand
had
up.
a hand up. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to, when you were talking about ways, and this is just a distraction too, but ways of getting some good press for DNR and Up the Grove is the September 6th rally by
Yeah.
Resources and Baker Group and about state lands. So
Yeah.
12 noon to 2 on September 6th is a great way to get out that information. But I want to hear more stories from Paul.
Well, and also there'll be my um, book event in Bellingham on the 13th of September at Village Books. And I hope there's a good crowd comes out to that to, rally for support for forests
Yeah.
and buy my book.
Paul, can I ask if you've had any readings in Olympia? Have you had any bookstore readings in
I
Olympia?
had one. I actually had one scheduled early on, just after the book was published, and I came down with the bout of COVID, so that didn't happen. But then with Lee Friend, the waterkeeper of Chehalis, is that right?
Lee First, you mean?
Lee
Lee?
First, yeah, Lee
She's
First.
Twin Harbors waterkeeper.
Twin,
Yeah.
yeah, Twin Harbors. And Lisa Crummett, who's on the board of one of these groups. I'm sure which one. We did events in Hoquiam in the morning or at noon, and then later at night at the Olympia Library with Josh at Legacy Forest Campaign.
Oh
That
yeah.
one,
Okay.
that
I
was
went to the
fun.
one, yeah, at where you and Jessica were at the library.
Actually, Jessica didn't make that one either.
Oh, so this was a different one. Okay. But I
Yeah.
just thought if you have any more bandwidth, it'd be great to get you into Browser's bookstore or somewhere where they do really regular readings.
I love talking about forests. I mean, there are a lot of people who are better at talking about forests than me, but I'm really happy to. And if there's someone who wants to sponsor an event somewhere, I will show up if I
Great,
can.
thanks.
If it doesn't coincide with my daughter's wedding, I get in trouble if I did that.
Did you have any stories sort of from the field or, any conversations or experiences that stuck with you, from the process of writing this book that, you like to share with folks?
I talked to this guy, this scientist at Tufts University named Bill Muma, who was actually the lead author of about five major IPCC reports, and he was one of the scientists that won the Nobel Prize in 2007, along with Al Gore. And he gave me these long, extended interviews and just explained everything to me so well. And it was a real experience learning from Bill, who's pretty much the leading scientist on the idea of protected forests. He wrote the key paper on it called Proforestation, which is his term they coined to signify protecting forests for this purpose. But just the interview with Bill, an interview with Beverly Law, retired forestry professor at Oregon State, who has done similar work. Just listening and learning from these scientists was, I just completely geeked out on that. It was a wonderful experience. And there's so many
What,
more.
what books are you reading right now, Paul?
I, you caught me. I am actually not reading a book right now because I'm writing a book. And it's really hard for me to write. And I mean, I read constantly, but to get wrapped up into another narrative, and I'm trying to figure out how to write this one. I mean, my brain isn't big enough. But I can recommend some books I've just finished that I think are wonderful. One of them is Braided Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's an indigenous writer, professor at the State University of New York. Um, Wonderful writer. Another book called Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard at UBC. She talks about the connection between different trees through a underground mycorrhizal root network. I loved her book. Um, I'd recommend those two for sure.
Maybe kind of along these lines of reading and process and communicating with folks effectively, um, what do you think are maybe some of the strengths of more of the like a journalistic and storytelling based approach versus some of the really interesting but more academic and sort of data heavy reads that are available to folks? How do you balance those elements in your own writing?
So, a friend of mine who is a professor, not a professor, a scientist, ecologist, research ecologist, wrote a book a few months ago that was like, I don't know, 800 pages long or 500 or something, ridiculous length. I mean, jam-packed full of information, but dense and hard to get through. And I think that not all scientists are like that. Most scientists are not really good at communicating. Um, so I think there's a role for journalists who can sort sort through the dense data and come up with a narrative that can actually be relate people can relate to. I think there's a definite need for that. I would think that maybe if scientists were better at communication, that we might have fewer problems of environmental problems. And I know I'm not going to make any friends, but I really feel that way. And I didn't name any names, so I'm in the clear. I will say that um, Chad Hampton's book, which you guys read last season, is Smoke Scene is a great book. I really enjoyed that book. So I have time for a few more questions if you guys want to ask them. Be happy to.
Can I just ask you to repeat the pro-forestation um, contact or the names of
Yes,
the
William Moomaw, who wrote a
Oh, yes, okay.
Moomaw,
Yeah, yeah, I'm familiar.
and his paper, 2019 paper on proforestation.
Okay.
Google that, and it'll uh,
Yeah, I know. I
that
got
is
it.
the pretty much the definitive paper on that subject. Another paper though that actually preceded his paper that kind of got there first by Beverly Law called Land Use Strategies, and it came out in 2018.
Great. Yeah, those are both familiar with those. Thank you very much.
And some of the other scientists I interviewed, Mark Harmon at Oregon State, Harmon. He has written a number of great papers. Um, I really recommend Mark on this subject.
Mm. I didn't raise my hand. May I ask a question? Um,
Yes,
yes. So, Paul, you kind of referred to something Daniel said as about this idea of trying to protect these forests for a long time against the future dangers of politicians and others, and that we would be the first ones to do that. And it got me thinking, just in terms of policy, um, what have you seen any other countries or entities who have adopted policies that move the needle in the direction of protecting forests that would be a good model? Because ultimately that's what we need here, right? And I'm
well,
not aware of anything.
I can't say any that have actually succeeded. President Biden had his old growth and mature forest policy, which he tried to protect on the national forest, and that didn't work. The Forest Service kind of dragged its feet. Then Trump came along, and that kind of went bye-bye. But I can't think of any, and that's sad. It's really sad. I mean, the
Yeah.
state of Washington has been a leader in so much of this with his Climate Commitment Act of 2020 22 or whenever it came out. I mean, no one else has done that. That's really a good piece of law.
Hmm.
The state of California has relied on something called carbon offsets, which is the idea that we use forests to mop up our current fossil fuel emissions so that we don't have to we don't have to stop burning oil or gasoline. And that is definitely the wrong way to go. There's no science that shows that it works as an offset. Um, it's basically a scam. So, efforts have been made, but nothing's happened. It'd be great to see Washington lead the way and then tell the world about it and make sure that people are aware that this is happening, it's being done. And I get the feeling that there are people in this room who are eager to do that. I'm
100%.
very heartened by that.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. Again, this one of my favorite books. It's just so incredible, so educational, so revolutionary. I'm really thankful you're here, and then also want to encourage everyone to show up September 13th. Do you remember what is it at 2 p.m.? I have it in my
It's 2 p.m.
calendar.
at Village Books. I
Yep,
have no
there we
idea
go.
the address, but it's in Bellingham.
hmm
Um,
I'll be there. I'll be facilitating the conversation as well,
and
and it'll be
thank
a
you
great
for
opportunity.
volunteering to do that. I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm super thrilled and excited, and I think it'll be fun to just see everyone in person. That's one of the reasons we do the forest walks.
Yeah,
Is
you all
just
come by and I'll sign a book for you
exactly,
if you want. I will
yeah,
very happy to do that if you think that's fun.
great.
Awesome.
You,
Will
you
do.
can pick up more copies to give to friends, and then pick up other books that are on the docket that we're going to be reading soon. You can just load up on books at Village Books.
One other thing you could do, just blowing my heart for another minute, is go on Amazon and write a review, positive review, if you feel moved to.
Awesome. That's an easy ask. All right, everyone. Well, we're a little after the half hour, and this has been great. I'm really enjoying these author talks. And again, I'm excited to
It was
see.
awesome. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming out, and I really appreciate it. Appreciate the support.
Thanks for
And I'll
being
see
here,
you. I'll
Paul.
see you September 13th in Bellingham.
Yeah, excited for it.
Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
take care, everyone. Have a
Wait,
great
thanks,
weekend.
Paul.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you all.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
seeing you,
you.
Laura.
You too, Paul. Sorry, I thought
I hope to
for
see
some
you on the
reason,
13th.
yes, I have it on my calendar.
Make sure you stop by.
I will.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.